Hey everyone, I'm Dan Saavedra from mergedata.com. We specialize in analytics and automation solutions for small businesses. Today we're going to be going over how to add and update Dropbox items into a Notion table, including the attachment links and information about the file. So let's jump right into it. Right now I'm in Dropbox, and let's say you want to add a folder where you can drop files and then publish those files to a Notion database that is public facing. So you can share files with anyone who's doing business with your company. So what we're going to do is first I'm going to create a folder, share with the public, and I'm going to click on create here. And then we're going to use this folder in Integromat to watch for files that we want to share with the public. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to go back over to Integromat here. I already created a new scenario. So what we're going to do is we're going to click on the plus button, we're going to click on Dropbox, and we're going to click on Watch Files. Now the Dropbox module in Integromat is really useful because it has this feature called Watch Also Subfolders. Other apps like Google Drive or Box don't have this, so you'll have to create individual scenarios for each and every subfolder that you have and that you want to watch. But with Dropbox, you don't have to do that. You just have to click this button, so you'll have one scenario that can watch all of the subfolders inside of your top level folder. So what I'm going to do here is I'm going to click here to choose folder, and I'm going to click on share with the public. And so now I have this folder selected, and Integromat's going to watch for any new items that are added to it. I'm going to up the limit to 10, and then I'm going to click on OK. And what we're going to do is choose on all for where to start. Even though this isn't really necessary because we're starting from scratch, let's say you have an existing folder, then what you'll do is you'll select all or choose manually or since a specific date. And basically what that'll let you do is choose the files that you want this to run on, and then Integromat will keep watching for new files going forward. But this lets you go back and add all those existing items to the Notion table after we configure this. So I'm going to select all, click OK. Now I'm going to add another module. I'm going to select Dropbox, and I'm going to select create/update a share link. And what this module will do is it's going to create a link that the public can access for each file that's uploaded in that folder. So I'm going to click on File Path here, and then I'm going to choose Path Lower from the previous module, and that will dictate the path that the share link is created for. Then I'm going to go down to Settings, and I'm going to choose Public. The other options are Team Only and Access with Password, so you can use those for different types of scenarios where you only want your team members who have a Dropbox account to access it, or you only want people with a password to be able to access this file. You can also map this field, and basically that becomes useful. Let's say you have a file with a specific naming convention that will be shared to the public, but other files with different naming conventions will not be. It'll only be shared to your team. And so this comes in handy because you can set a variable step beforehand and dictate what the visibility is on the fly rather than hard coding or hard configuring this to one of the options. The next field is links expiration date. Now, I don't want to configure this. I just want this to be a publicly available link, so we're going to leave this blank. But if you wanted to only have files available for a certain period of time, then you can set an expiration date. Let's say on your public Notion page, you filter a view by the current year. You can also set links to the file to expire at the end of the year so that people can't accidentally access the wrong file. That's just one example of a use case that you could do. But what we are going to configure is this links access level. And so we're going to select viewer because we only want people to be able to download the object. We don't want them to edit it or have maximum access to change other settings. So we're just going to leave it at viewer, and we're going to click OK. Now the next step that we're going to add in is a Notion module, and we're going to do search objects. And one thing to note before we even jump into the configuration of this is that with Notion and Integromat, if you have a connection set up and you add a new page to Notion, you're going to have to disconnect and reconnect your integration with Integromat. Integromat will not pick up on any new pages added to your workspace. So you have to once again disconnect and then reconnect Notion in order to pick up on those new databases and new items. But what we're going to do here is we are going to click on search, and before I do that, let me go over to Notion. In Notion, I already set up a database table, but I'm just going to show you what that would look like if you're making this from scratch. And so if I just search table here, you can see table database, and you would just select that, and it will bring you to a newly made table database that can be configured. So the columns that I have configured are 1, the name column, so the property type is title. 2 is attachment. The property title or the property type is files and media. I have a last edited time. I like to keep track of when things are updated in tables. You might want to also show this to people who are accessing the page. So this is very useful for that. You can also create, for that purpose, just a date field instead if you didn't want to do the last edited time. But I like to just use the automated field of the last edited time in order to do that. The next thing is a URL field. So this is optional, but it's just another way in order to configure a link where people can download these files publicly. It's the alternative to the attachment here. Attachment will give you the option of an embed link. So when you upload a file, you can add in a URL and a title, where with the URL you're just going to be adding in the URL itself. So we have this table existing already. If I go back here and I search for the exact term of the database name, if I search for the exact database name here in the query search and click OK, what should happen is I should get my database ID here, and Integromat should populate the fields from that table. And so that ID is simply this value right here. So let's say you're having trouble with the search feature there. You can just copy everything before the question mark V, and then that will be your database ID. Once again, if you're having trouble finding the database, it might be because you have to reconfigure your connection. You have to disconnect and reconnect to Notion with Integromat. But what we're going to do here is we're going to filter by the name. We're going to say equals, and then we're going to choose the name field here from either the previous step or the first step. Both are okay. They should be the exact same. So we're going to select that there. And then we're going to click on OK. Now the reason why we're searching objects here is so that we can return results if there's an existing object. And like I was talking about before in this database, sometimes you want to show the last edited time of the document. And so this step is useful because then we can update an item and just display the date that it was last updated. So let's say you overwrite a file in Dropbox. It's a new picture or document version. What will happen is we can then go into the Notion database table database and then update that field. So what I'm going to do here, I'm actually going to create another column here for document last updated, just so we can see the other property type. We'll go to date. And then we'll come back here to Integromat. We're going to add a router. So the router will allow us to basically send the scenario run down a path depending on if results were returned from the previous step. And so how we're going to do that is we're going to choose this filter path right here. So you can just click on that, or you can right click and do set up a filter. And then what we're going to do is we're going to name this no object exists, create new one, and then I'm going to correct this. Then I'm going to go to condition here, total number of bundles, which is the search results that are returned. And I will scroll down to numeric operators. This is very important. Text operators will not get you the correct result. So we're going to want to go condition total number of bundles equal to 0. So what this is going to do is if there's nothing in the Notion table already, it's going to route down this path. And what we're going to do is make a module or select a module, and we're going to do create a database item. And then what we can do is we can either enter manually or select from the list. Selecting from the list is the same thing we did before, so we would search for test database and it'll bring that in. The other option, if we do enter manually, we could just instead take the database ID here from the search objects and place that right there. And so doing it this way would make things much more dynamic. So let's say you're searching across, like you have multiple steps where you're searching across different databases or anything like that, you'll be able to dynamically enter the database ID. So that's exactly how we will do that. Now, the only drawback to that is that you then will have to map each of the fields, which gets a little bit more complicated, where if you do select from list, and you do the search method, and then you populate it, it will automatically have the fields there for you to configure. So that's much better if you're keeping things simple in your scenario. It's much easier to configure these fields. And so what we're going to do is we're going to choose the name field here from this step. It doesn't really matter if you choose it from this one or this one, they should be the same. We're gonna scroll down, and first I'm going to configure the URL. Whoops. And so this is important because there's a formula that you need to do in order to get this to work correctly. From my experience, at the time of this video, this is how the scenarios are built that I use. Basically what we're going to do is we're going to do a replace formula here. You can also do it by selecting the text function. So let's say instead we want to do it this way. We'll click replace to enter that formula. Then what we're going to do is we're going to select the URL that was created via this create, update, share link step. So we are going to drag and drop that into the first spot there. And then what we're going to do is we're going to replace the dropbox.com link with dl.dropboxusercontent.com. And that will make the link directly downloadable. Otherwise, you might run across issues with your link to the file there. So we'll do that. Now, that was for the URL field. So it'll just display a pure URL. Let's say we wanted to instead do the attachment method instead. It would be the URL formula that we just configured there. And then we're going to also put in the file name, which would just be the same name field that we configured for the top step. So those are the two options there. Then what we're going to do is configure the document last updated field. We're going to populate the start time. And there's two methods that you can use to update this. One would be to just use the now variable. And then the other one would be to use another field from the actual steps, which would be client modified at from this create, update, a share link or the watch file step. And the reason you would want to use this one instead of now is let's say that you have a scenario that didn't run successfully for some reason, or it was delayed, basically by using this variable, you're pulling that Dropbox modified date when the trigger was hit rather than the now, which let's say you run this 3 days later, it'll take the now value of when the scenario runs. So basically it'll be inaccurate. So that's our configuration for the create a database item. Now let's go down to this next path here. We're going to set up the filter, and so this one will be called object exists update row, and it's going to be similar to the filter we made above, but instead of equal to, we're going to choose not equal to in the numeric operators. You could also choose greater than or greater than or equal to, depending on how you want to configure it, but we're going to choose not equal to 0, so anything that's not a 0 is going to go down this route. And then the only difference here is we're going to do update a database item instead, but all the other configurations will be the same. So we're going to go to test database. I'm going to click on OK, and then what it's going to do is populate the fields, and we're going to go through and do the same thing by updating this field with name from module 9. I'm going to go to start time, and I'm going to input client modified at. Once again, we're going to leave the end time blank. This is optional. It's only for date ranges, which is not what we're doing. And then we're going to paste the same formula in the URL, and then we're going to configure the name field here. And then if you notice, I skipped over this database item ID, but this is very important. And so what this is our search object results will provide a page ID, and we're going to want to select that page ID. So I'm going to click OK here, and now we have everything configured. So now what we're going to do is we're just going to add in some files to this shared with the public folder so that we can test out this trigger. And so what I'm going to do is I'm going to drag and drop a few pictures in there, a few PDFs, just so we can see how everything looks. So I'm going to download some dashboard example photos. I'm going to do a PowerPoint, and then I'll do a PDF as well. And that's good to go. So we don't have the scenario turned on yet. I'm just going to move my picture over here. One of the things that I didn't cover initially was this scheduling. And so with Integromat, there is no instant trigger available. And so instead what we'll be doing is doing this regular intervals, and then we'll be setting it to 15 minutes. For me, I like to save on my operations in Integromat. So instead of doing every 5 minutes or every 1 minute, where we were using up a lot of operations just for checking if any changes are made, instead I'm going to be doing 15 minutes. If you know you're not going to be working on weekends, for example, you could change this to Monday through Friday. You could even change the time from all hours to working hours. So let's say you work from 9 to 6 p.m. You can change it, you can change it to 9 to 6, and then that will save you operations. So just for testing, I'm going to switch this to all, and then I'm going to click on run once, and I always forget to save. my work, but make sure to save your work there. And so what we should see is all of these objects should be added to Notion, so we should see them all route down this path here because we don't have any existing objects in there. So we'll let this run, and we can actually see this being updated as we go here. You can see that the images are actually embedded as an attachment, while these attachments are actually just links. So if you were to click on them, what would happen is it would download the file because that's the Dropbox attachment link, the download link. While the images here, you can actually just open them up and see that they're embedded in the page. The URL, it's not as pretty as this attachment field, so it's just the direct link. And then you can see that our document last updated field has been populated. The last edited time is automatic, so every time we edit this record, this will be updated, but this one is populated specifically by Integromat. So it looks like it ran successfully. You can see how these files that are PDFs and PowerPoints are instead just a link to download, and then the images themselves are actually embedded. And so what I'm going to do here is I'm going to re-upload this dashboard.png file, but I'm going to create a new version that's a completely different image so you can see what it looks like when we update a file using this method. So you can see this is what it looks like, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to create another dashboard.png file. I'm going to re-upload it, or upload this new version to Dropbox so you can see it's the Facebook logo now. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to go back to Integromat just for our testing purposes. I'm going to click on run once, and then what we should see is this route, this path taken. Perfect. So this looks like it updated. Yep, and we can see it actually updated the row here, and it's the Facebook logo now right there. So we'll reopen the attachment, and then you can also see that it was updated at 4:29, which is 2 minutes after the last run that we did. So this is the basic premise of how to update a Notion database with Dropbox folders and items. One last thing to test out is the subfolder functionality of the watch item. So let's say we are going to want to create a subfolder here just for something like, we'll just do images in general, even though we've already uploaded images. So we create this images folder. There's nothing in it, but let's add some things to it. So I'm going to add a bunch of screenshots here. And then what we're going to do after these upload is we're going to run the automation one more time just to see if it's successfully watching the subfolders of that folder. So we have it checked, but let's run the scenario and see exactly what it picks up. And so it looks like it's running successfully here. If we go back to the test database, what we should see is these screenshot files. Yep, there they are, of that subfolder. And so it looks like it works. It looks like the subfolders in Dropbox are successfully watched. It looks like they're added to Notion, and that's it. So thanks for watching. If you have any questions, make sure to post them as a comment below, and I'll try to answer them the best I can.